Imagine being told that Earth will cease to be habitable by humanity in the near future, and that you have been selected as one of the lucky few to continue the existence of the entire human race. Then, imagine boarding a large colony ship with the other lucky few to venture into deep space for a new world that humanity can call home. But were you and your descendants really lucky? In this video, we'll be examining the lore of the Earth colony ship Constant, or ECS Constant, and the heavy cost 9 generations of humans would pay to continue what they thought was the last of humanity on an aging hunk of metal floating through the infinite dark abyss of space. If you're interested in more Starfield lore, definitely check out my other videos, and if you want to know more about Starfield, check out starfieldwiki.net, created by the team behind UESP. After a grav drive jump to what we think is a much-needed vacation, we spacefarers come upon a mysterious ship in orbit over the planet of Porrima 2, home to the galaxy's most famous resort, Paradiso. We're quickly hailed by the security chief of Paradiso, who tells us to meet him planetside in regards to the ship. As we attempt communications with this mysterious vessel, all we get is unintelligible noises, hissing, static, and other noise. Exercising caution just in case the ship is full of spacers, Crimson Fleet, or maybe even spooky outer space ghosts, we'll land in Paradiso and meet with Chief Sugiyama, who speculate that either the comms array on the mysterious ship are broken, or that maybe, just maybe, it could be alien life forms making first contact with humanity, considering that there's no known markings on the ship's exterior or any indication of it being friendly nor hostile. No one knows what the ship is, and fearing that the tourism and the image of the resort could be tarnished by this anomaly, the board of Paradiso executives have also rerouted shuttles so passengers can't see the ship. Chief Sugiyama asks us to investigate, so we head back out into orbit and attempt to hail the ship again. Yet again, our call is unanswered, but by the screeches and white noise on the other end. We decide to dock with it, and we find that it's definitely a human ship, judging from the passageway to the docking door. As we approach the entrance, we hear a firm voice call out, "Weapons at the ready." We open the door and we find, well, normal human beings in attire you don't recognize to be of New Atlantis or neon fashion, or really the 24th century fashion. As we exchange words with the young Captain Diana Brackenridge, we come to discover that they too thought we were non-human life forms because, as it turns out, they believed they were the last humans left in the entire universe. But how's that possible? As we make our way to the bridge of the ship, Brackenridge explains that her wealthy ancestor, Rupert Brackenridge, somehow calculated that the Earth, or rather humanity stuck on Earth, would be at risk of extinction due to a various number of possible scenarios ranging from nuclear war to an asteroid hitting it. And so the ECS Constant was built before the invention of the grav drives that allowed the rest of humanity to essentially skip past the ECS Constant, technologically and physically. Diana informs us that she's also only captain because the position is hereditary, which definitely throws us off, as merit or skill would perhaps be the first thing one will look at in such a constant state of danger. As we explored the ECS Constant by meeting others and using subterfuge, we discovered that Rupert Brackenridge had gathered and convinced his circle of wealthy friends and acquaintances who would chip in to construct the colony ship, and that they and their families would be the ones embarking on this 190-year journey to Porrima 2. They named their proposed destination New Jamestown, an obvious reference to the Virginian Jamestown, which was founded by an all-male colony of Englishmen who boarded the ships Discovery, Godspeed, and Susan or Sarah Constant, that we historians today still aren't 100% sure was Susan or Sarah. In his last autobiography called What If I'm Right, which was apparently published on Earth before they set off for space, Rupert Brackenridge writes, "But crisis looms in our future, whether we want to believe or not. While Earth may not be fragile, it's faced a number of mass extinctions, meteor strikes, ice ages, wars, and other global catastrophes, the human race only has one home. And if that home becomes inhospitable, no number of underground bunkers will be enough to survive the tide. Precisely, this is why I started the Earth Colony Ship Initiative. It's why I reached out to the best and brightest minds of the 22nd century for their funding and their expertise. If humanity is to not only survive but thrive, we must shoot for the stars. It is my hope that others reading these words will join me in this endeavor and follow my lead. I'm tired of waiting for politicians of the world to agree on a course of action to preserve humanity for all of time. This is why it's up to private enterprises such as my own Bracken Global to develop our own ventures. Upon its completion, the ECS Constant will be the first ship of its kind, a colony ship built to transport a selection of humanity beyond our solar system, deep into territory unknown, to our new Garden of Eden. My scientists assure me our new home is fundamentally perfect in every way, and I aim to keep it that way. It will be a world built on renewable energy, a reliable, equitable foundation from which our new society will grow. And from there, new colony ships will be built and sent to new planets to colonize them under the same ideals and values. A brilliant new future for humanity, and though it may take hundreds or thousands of years, I have little doubt that it will lead humanity to brave new frontiers and set a shining example for any other life we may find along the way. Rupert definitely had some of the right ideas. Who wouldn't be tired of pointless politicians bickering as the potential doom of humanity loomed? And as emphasized by Constellation members, humanity perhaps are explorers first and foremost. Yet something bothers us about the implications of Rupert's writing as we look around the captain's office. There are a total of 9 portraits set on the walls, each portraying every ECS Constant captain up until Diana, who we had met. 8 to 9 generations of humans had lived entire lives in this ship and died while in the process creating a bizarre microcosm of human society where everyone knew everyone without the potential for encountering other groups of people, or without the potential of ever expanding to the point where the population is large enough that there may be strangers. Horrifyingly, we discover when talking to Dr. Rolale, the wife of Dr. Mabudi, that shortly before the ECS Constant arrived to Porima 2, Mabudi had offered himself up for euthanasia so that he may die, so that the space on the ship and rations are not taken up needlessly by extra bodies. We come to also find out that the ECS Constant inhabitants have had to resort to some sort of system where they chose someone to die if there were no volunteers, which makes us wonder if they simply drew straws, or if they voted, or perhaps they just chose the oldest person. It also makes us wonder if in this highly rigid hierarchy of the colony ship, if there are actually positions that are immune to this system, because it doesn't seem like the hereditary position of captain based on the 9 portraits we saw earlier would be affected, nor a vital position such as a doctor or pilot. What about children? Would they even be considered? Could the head of security be forced to die, considering they will be one of the authorities in detaining or imprisoning resistors, as we discover that there is even a prison bay? There's definitely some circle vibes going on here. The morbid idea of involuntary or voluntary euthanasia makes sense, but is only the tip of the iceberg of psychological horrors the inhabitants of the ECS Constant had to go through. We stumble into a classroom session where Julia Yang, the ship's chief historian in charge of keeping Earth or humanity's history intact, is teaching children. She confirms that they are all descendants of wealthy elites, intellectuals, artists, scientists, and other individuals who departed Earth in the year 2040, which contradicts Breckenridge's writings from the 2100s and Diana's estimate of 190 years, starting from the year 2141, as the current year we're exploring the Starfield is in 2330. This doesn't mean the ship was going for 290 years, it just means Julia doesn't seem to be very good at her job or truly believes in her profession, as hinted by her sister Janet, the head of hydroponics, whom we meet later. We also find out that Julia has given up her supposed right to have children for the sake of others who wish to have families due to the lack of space and resources. As we look around the classroom, we note that pretty old computers and materials lay around that are definitely pre-24th century. Even in the captain's quarters and the armory we had snuck into earlier, there were Earth antiques such as a basketball, a hockey stick, and very old ballistic weapons from Earth, so it's no surprise even the classroom is outdated. We then notice that there's a journal written by an Amala Mishra, a teenager who was part of the first generation that boarded the ECS Constant. It's a fascinating look into what life must have been like, but in the entries, we find a good deal of suffering.
March 2nd, 2141. This ship is super boring. I thought space would be fun, but it's not. Most of the other kids on board are younger than me. My school lessons are kind of stupid because the teacher, Mr. DaCosta, focuses on younger kids and forgets about me and the older kids. I really miss my friends from back home. I wonder if everything's okay on Earth. June 16th, 2141. I've been hanging out with Ezra a lot lately. There aren't many other people my age on board, and Pierre is already interested in Janika, so I figured maybe it'd be a good idea to get to know him. Turns out we have some things in common. We both like retro movies and games. He introduced me to some music I hadn't heard before, like Sasha and the Lowdown Thieves. It got me thinking though, we'll never hear anything new from bands we like, ever. Maybe we should start a band. We'd have to learn how to play music, of course. I'll have to see what Ezra thinks. November 11th, 2141. Mom says everyone gets assigned a job here on the Constant. She also said that if I don't start doing my homework instead of practicing music, she's going to recommend me to trash and toilet cleaning duty. She's just mad because they put her in hydroponics instead of medical because we have too many doctors on board. April 24th, 2142. Dad had a little freak out. He says he feels like the walls are closing in on him. He got mad and tried to open the airlock, so they had to put him in the brig overnight until he calmed down. I think a lot of people feel the same way, because this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Mom says things will be better for future generations, because they won't know any different. But for those of us who remember the outdoors, it's going to be a hard life. Tell me why they thought this was a good idea again? August 9th, 2199. Ezra passed in his sleep last night, peacefully. Lila, Gideon, their spouses and little ones, and myself will hold a small memorial service in the atrium with all our friends before he's cremated and put into the mausoleum. It was only a month ago when I asked him if he had any regrets in life. He told me that no, spending it with me was all he dreamed it could be and more, wherever we were. While I still wish we had not been trapped on the Constant, I can think of no better person to have spent my life with. I am thankful for his love and companionship all these years and will miss him dearly.
There's a few key takeaways from Amala's writings. First, the inability for the humans on board to express creativity or desire to pursue their goals as the maintenance of the ship and society demands them to fulfill jobs they may or may not like is very ironic, as the first generation of the ship's inhabitants were intellectuals, scientists, artists, and so forth. We can't imagine essentially being assigned a lifelong job we can't bear to do inside of a hunk of metal floating through the dark sea of space, knowing that we would die doing said job before we ever get to see our destination, or even get to experience anything but. Second, based on the timeline from 2142 to 2199 in the journal, the ECS Constant was a colossal waste of effort in retrospect that caused unnecessary suffering. In the time it took Amala and Ezra to become grandparents, humans had used grav drives to arrive in the Alpha Centauri system instantly, covering an insane 4.37 light years of distance from Earth, shortly after they launched. The United Colonies was established barely 3 years later. New Atlantis is founded, Aquila City is founded, the Freestar Collective is established, and the first intergalactic war, the Narian War, starts. And since Amala's likely death in the early 2200s up until present time, entire factions, technologies, historical events, and such continue without any regard for the existence of the ECS constant, in a tragic and mocking twist by the fates of the universe, the people who had left behind humanity was in reality left behind by everybody else and forgotten. Third and last, the slow encroachment of insanity gripping at least the first generation of colonists would have been a huge threat to the entire colony ship. Amala's father trying to get out of the ship into space because he can't handle what's essentially a death sentence in space when he remembers the touch of grass, the wind, the taste of salt in the ocean air, and so much more. And Amala's father and others behaving this way may be a reason behind why we see so much security on the ECS constant in an almost disproportionate fashion when compared to non-security members of the ship. We also know that it wasn't just the first generation that would be psychologically tormented, as we find a ghost report written by an unknown colonist. I heard it again, the unintelligible whispers. When I closed my eyes to sleep, this time they were accompanied by some faint tapping of nails against metal, like some sort of Morse code, but I couldn't tell you what it translates to. The raspy voices sound otherworldly, echoing in my ears. I reported it to Officer Rita, but he said it's probably just some kids playing, making noises against the ventilation. But while everyone's sleeping, why would they do that? I've asked some of the parents, but they all said their kids were sound asleep. If this keeps happening, I don't know what I'll do. I feel like I'm going out of my mind, and losing another night's sleep is gonna take its toll on me. Maybe I need to take a trip to the mausoleum and pay my respects to the dead? It's weird that we keep them on board, right? They could be getting as restless as we are. We can draw two conclusions about this particular person's fate. The first is that they're still alive, and perhaps the noise they kept hearing was the engine bay 6 malfunction mentioned by Chief Engineer Amin in a message to the captain, although this seems unlikely as the noise is described as rumbling by Amin. The second conclusion is that the author of the ghost report is the dead body we can find in the mausoleum that's still not yet cremated, implying that they had just died recently. Perhaps in a burst of madness, the author just couldn't take it anymore, and when they got to the mausoleum, killed themselves as they simply couldn't handle the confinement of the ECS constant. This is made all the more tragic by the fact that if they had held on for just a little longer, they would have seen their destination, just as the others we met are. Perhaps worst of all, the takeaways we can gather, just as we can observe in other instances throughout the Zealot systems, the ECS constant, despite having no grav jump capabilities, had no earth fauna such as dogs or cats or really anything for companionship apart from some earth native flora that we can see in the hydroponic section, such as the earth trees. We form more and more questions in our mind as we explore the rest of the ship. Out of the 149 people that died and are listed in the mausoleum computer, how many were forced to die? Was the person whose initials that spelled out ass a rebellious individual? How do people have private moments in these cramped living quarters? Can you even have intimate moments in such an environment? Communal bathrooms and a shower area say otherwise. What about essential vitamins such as vitamin D3 from sunlight? We discover that even this is something to think about as we find a message from the medical bay to Captain Diana, who needs to take more vitamin D supplements. Things were definitely looking tough, if not dire, as we talk to Daisuke, the person in charge of provisions and distribution of rations. We find out from Captain Diana Brackenridge's computer that they're out of freeze-dried strawberries, and that Daisuke refused to open up the seed vault for fear of contamination or losing entire species of plants from Earth just to sate the hunger or desires of the colonists. It seems that despite the usage of hydroponics, the ship is always in a state of recycling food or keeping tight rations amongst all the people, and that they're about to use the last of their supplies. We even find out that the engineering team literally has to scrounge up scrap metal just to keep the almost 200-year-old equipment going in a stable condition, meaning they were running out of certain parts or materials or parts, which begs the question of how they would have even created a landing vessel provided their destination was even habitable when they got there. The very fact that the ECS Constant has even reached Porrima 2, apparently a few decades ahead of schedule, was dumb luck, and also owed to the piloting skills of Yu Garcia, who took advantage of the gravity of stars that they didn't know about to propel themselves faster without fuel. The ties of society on the ECS Constant also seem dangerously close to snapping, further insinuated by the presence of even more security in every area. We find out from talking to the counselor and community activities manager Abe Levitz that people were incredibly stressed and anxious basically all the time, and that the possibility of aliens approaching them didn't help. We even see that he, basically the only other therapist apart from Dr. Mabuti for the entire ship, is incredibly stressed, which speaks to the inadequacy of the constant society to accommodate for almost anything else, including mental health, with the exception of physical survival. A far cry from the driving boasted of by the original Captain Rupert Breckenridge in his autobiography. We also find a distressful message from him to Captain Diana in her computer, with no response from Diana, implying she ignored him, or as young and inexperienced as she is, just didn't know how to take care of such a matter. Diana even outright speculates that some may even resent her for her inexperience when we first talked to her. Perhaps we came in at a rather good point in time for the ECS Constant, as much of the attention is now focused on us, and we can feel a sense of relief on board the ship that the people we meet are not the only human survivors out in the galaxy. It's as if a great burden has been lifted from the shoulders of the colonists we talk to, who can now dare dream of pursuing what they want to do, such as raising a family or being an artist, without regard for the entire state of the ship. It also helps that no one needs to be forced to die for the sake of keeping supplies and space on the ship at a balanced level for the Constant to keep going. Armed with the knowledge of what the ECS Constant is and what they want, we talk to Oliver of the Paradiso Executive Board to convey the wishes of their captain and people. Although Rupert Breckenridge had apparently staked a legal claim for Porrima 2 on Earth before he left, his document was either destroyed or not taken seriously before or during humanity's exodus from Earth, so legally we can't dispute Paradiso on the ownership of Porrima 2. We are instead offered three choices. We can 1. Destroy the ship by overloading the engines, 2. Outfit the ECS Constant with a grav drive and an updated star map so they can look for a similar world, 3. Commit the inhabitants of the ECS Constant into indentured servitude to Paradiso. Which we go with is, well, up to all of us, but the outcome is unfortunately not the focus of this video. Overall, I found the premise of the ECS Constant fascinating and wish the Starfield writers did a bit more with it. I find the musings of Rupert Breckenridge to be quite interesting, as his conclusions in regards to the fate of humanity or Earth seem to take after what we historians would say is a rather risky endeavor. After all, someone claiming the exact trajectory of human history or the end state of humanity, such as Karl Marx's thoughts on socialism and the end of history in The Last Man written by Francis Fukuyama, have been proven to be not exactly accurate thus far in our own reality, perhaps because we are humans. The lore definitely also drew heavy inspiration from the stark reality of human exploration and settlement by its namesakes, New Jamestown and Constant, in our reality's history that we take for granted today. There's a wonderful book called Seasons of Misery, Catastrophe and Colonial Settlement in Early America, which I highly recommend reading for those of you interested in both the history that actually does cover the grim and dirty reality of colonial settlements, such as Jamestown, and the themes of madness, catastrophe, and suffering, the ECS Constant, that we've explored in this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about the ECS Constant, and if you'd like to see more lore content, definitely subscribe to the channel. I'll see all of you out there in the Starfield.